Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great start to your year. So if you were following me towards the end of last year, you will have seen that I picked up the Pat McGrath Mothership V palette in her sale that she had. And I also picked up a couple of her lipsticks, like my first purchases from her brand towards the end of last year. So I asked you guys, I polled you guys and asked you whether you wanted a like unboxing and first impressions, whether you wanted just like a few looks with the eyeshadow palette, or whether you wanted like a brand review and an answer to the question, is Pat McGrath really worth the crazy price tag? And you guys wanted that one, so here we are. Now I know a few of you pointed out, and also I totally agree and hear where you're coming from, that it's very hard an individual to answer the question, is it worth it? Because of course it depends on your taste, on your budget, on how much that money means to you, on what your priorities are, on whether you like the brand, the shades appeal to you, all that stuff. So obviously there is a very individual answer to that question. So what I'm going to try and help you guys with today is whether it is value for money, which I think is a more kind of broad answer, if you see what I mean. I feel like there's some sort of information and help that I can give you to answer that bit. Are you getting value for money? Is the price justified? So that's what I'm going to try and help you today. I also feel like there's slightly different answers when it comes to this brand, when it comes to the lipsticks and when it comes to the eyeshadows. And those are the two products that I have tried and I've been like testing out for you guys, which is why it's taken me so long to do this video, because I wanted to use every shade in the palette. I wanted to try all different looks. I wanted to really consider what I was telling you. So first of all, let's start with some swatches. Here are the swatches from the eyeshadow palette. Now there are a couple of things to note about this eyeshadow palette. Obviously I can't speak on every Pat palette because I only have the one. However, I do, as far as I know, the formula is the same across her palettes. During the time I've been putting this video together for you guys, I have watched a huge amount of other reviews of the other palettes, of this palette, to get an idea whether the things that I'm thinking and the information I'm giving you is not just my opinion, but it's kind of the general opinion about Pat McGrath. If you go into a shop, a Sephora or wherever, and you swatch this palette or Pat McGrath shadows in general, they are not going to perform like a patch with a finger swatch on your hand that they do when you actually use them. So that's the first thing to note, because I know some people will go in, swatch it and be like, well, what's so special about this? And just to let you know that especially when it comes to her mattes, is not going to give you at all an idea of how they actually are or perform on your eyes. The shimmers or the glitters in here, much more accurate as far if you give it a swatch and put it on your hand. They are literally, you know, one little swirl and a swipe, and they are glorious, stunning, sparkly perfection. But the mattes, when you sort of swirl them on your finger and swipe, I find that the pigment doesn't really transfer onto your hand very well. It can look a bit patchy, and that's very misleading. That is not how they perform like with a brush on the eye. So bear that in mind. If you've been put off by swatching them in store before, it's not the same thing. The second thing to note is if you've been put off by tutorials before, because you are looking at the eye look that they've done and you're thinking, well, it doesn't look that special, you know, the glitters don't look that great. The second thing to note when it comes to these shadows is there is absolutely no review that I have seen that is able to translate what these shadows look like in real life, in person, through the lens. And I've seen so many people say that it just doesn't come across on camera how glorious and spectacular these glitters are. They are absolutely stunning in real life, so glittery. They catch the eye, they look like diamonds on the eye, they look wet, they just look like heaven. Whatever photo you take or video you do or lens or light, it just doesn't seem to capture how amazing they look in real life. So again, if you're thinking, you're watching a video and you're thinking they don't look that great, the shimmers don't look that, you know, spectacular, they're not changing my life, then bear in mind that that is not probably translating how they looked in person. So there's a couple of things that if you've been put off by those things, just to note. So here is the eyeshadow palette in all its glory. Now, Something that might not matter to other people, but I know it matters to me, and so therefore I'm sure I'm not the only one, and that is packaging. So this is the outer packaging that you get with your Pat McGrath. So this little loop goes around, you untwist it, and then inside this little box is the palette. And this is a gorgeous little package. It's absolutely beautiful, very luxurious, very solid. Same thing with the lipsticks. They come in these little boxes with the little tie. Very sweet, very unique, very luxurious packaging. What I was actually really surprised by when I received my first Pat package is the outer packaging. So I've ordered direct from Dior before, and I've ordered direct from Charlotte Tilbury and from, you know, several high-end brands. And generally the outer packaging is also beautiful. It's like a gorgeous outer box, you know, luxuriously coloured with beautiful lettering on, and then you get the gorgeous internal packaging. Charlotte Tilbury uses that beautiful tissue paper. Dior uses everything black tissue paper. You get loads of samples in there. The receipt comes in a glorious embossed envelope, and I was just really surprised and maybe slightly disappointed. I know it doesn't matter to how the makeup performs, but I was surprised that literally this glorious packaging is just inside a plain cardboard box. So I was just a bit like, oh, okay, because it just doesn't feel as special for the price. You get no samples or anything extra at all. And that was a little disappointing. I feel like when you're paying, you know, a huge amount of money for makeup, it really doesn't help and make it feel special if everything is really luxurious and if you get some free samples and things like that. So that is something that I was just a bit like, okay, it's fine. So we're going to start with the eyeshadow palette, and I have done a demo for you of this look that I am wearing today because it uses, you know, about half the shades in the palette just to show you how they perform. So I started off with this shade up here, the lightest matte in the palette, and just buffed that in my crease using the Sigma E40, I think. Yes, and the first thing to note about these mattes, although you only get 3 mattes in the palette, which I know for some people is really off-putting because they want more mattes to shimmer ratio. But I will say that these 3 mattes, I can't again speak for every palette, but these mattes are very buildable and totally blendable, and you can really build them up. So this, I started off with this shade really lightly, and you can see it's a very light, very natural wash of colour. And I then went back in to that same colour using my Morphe M441, and I built it up in the crease, and it almost looks like a second shade, like a darker matte shade. And you can build that up and build that up and literally just make a whole look out of these one matte shades. Using this one, you can use this one very lightly, and as you will see, this is the next shade that I used, this gorgeous aubergine shade. Is that what they call it? Yeah, I think you guys call it eggplant, don't you? Yeah, we call it aubergine, but you know, tomato. So yeah, so this one can be used very lightly like I did today, and it can also be incredibly deep, dark, smoky. So although you only have the 3 mattes in here, they are very versatile, and you can build them up like on top of each other, on top of themselves, and make deeper and give some depth and some dimension to looks without needing more shades. If you do not like glitter, this palette is not for you. These shades look like glitter, as if you've used a loose glitter on the lid, but you don't need glue. You literally, I use my flat brush, my MAC 242, and I went in with this shade today on the lid, and then I used this one in my inner corners, and they literally look as if I've used a glitter, but there's no fallout on my face. There's no need to use an adhesive. They literally go on with a flat brush. I didn't even use a wet brush today, and Pat does advise that you use either a wet brush or a finger to apply these, but I just prefer to use a brush. Sometimes I use a finger, I prefer to use a brush, and I didn't even bother to wet it today because I just wanted to show you guys without wetting the brush, and there's just really no need most of the time. They are just glorious. But if you don't like glittery shadows, they aren't like a sort of wet, this one is more of a, like what we think of as a shimmer, but the rest of them are very glittery, sparkly, diamond-like shadows. It's an absolutely stunning palette. There is no getting away from that. The mattes are the best mattes I have ever used, and the glitters or shimmers, whatever you want to call them, are the prettiest, most stunning shadows I've ever used as far as the shimmers as well. The mattes are like butter. They blend out so easily. You can literally do one little dab with your blending brush and cover your entire lid. It goes so far, and that is about, I guess, the uniqueness. If you are a real beginner with eyeshadow palettes and you use something like an Anastasia shadow palette, which I feel like they're very easily put together, like it's very easy to look as a beginner at an Anastasia palette and think that's the ones that go together, these are the looks, they're kind of laid out for you to help you put them together. This is harder for me. I'm not a makeup artist. I'm not that experienced. I love makeup, but I have no training or anything like that. For me, it's definitely trickier to know what to do with this eyeshadow palette. I have to sort of think about it more, which isn't an issue for me, but if you struggle putting combos together and things like that, you may find this harder to work with than a simpler palette that maybe has more mattes and more options and shades that you can clearly see what to use together. You might find it trickier to work with this if you're a real beginner. If packaging means nothing to you, you don't care, then I don't think this is going to be worth it to you, because as soon as you pick this up in your hand, you will understand where a lot of the price is coming from. This feels like a brick, no lie. It is so heavy. It has this mirror effect on the back with the gorgeous typed out. I mean, this is so dirty. I'm so sorry. It's very thick, sturdy, heavy. The mirror is like beveled mirror. Everything about it screams class, sophistication, expensive. Undoubtedly, to buy this packaging and put this packaging together will probably have cost double what it would have cost to put like the Anastasia palettes together, which are like that sort of cardboard material, and like they weigh, nothing compared to this. So I'm pretty sure that that is going to account for quite a lot of the price difference between some of the more affordable but still high-end palettes, because you've got such a stunning quality, amazing, beautiful mirror. You've got such quality, solid, expensive, heavy packaging in here. Another thing that is going to account for the price difference between, for example, an Anastasia palette and a Pat McGrath palette is the size of the pans. The total weight of all of the shadows combined in the Pat McGrath is 13.3 grams, and it was £105. In the Anastasia palettes, you get 14 shades versus 10, but you get 10.36 grams, I believe, for a total of £43. So although you get a few extra shadows, you get 4 more shades, you do actually have less overall product, but not a huge amount. It's a few grams, but that is obviously a slight difference. And you can obviously see the difference in the packaging and the mirror and everything in here is far cheaper. Now, obviously, I wouldn't have bought this palette if I didn't think it was worth it to me with my budget, with, how I was able to find the money to pay for it, the fact that I waited for the sale, which was 25% off, and I really considered which palette I wanted to buy, which palette was for me, would I use it? I don't think this is like, I'm gonna use this every single day of the week, but to me that isn't a negative. I love pulling this out when I wanna really enjoy putting my makeup on and treat myself and have a really luxurious look. I do use it, on a regular day as well. It's very wearable today. The look I've done today is very wearable for day to day. But if you just want an everyday of your life palette, there are definitely probably easier and more affordable options that will be absolutely fine for a lot less money. If you want something that is very luxurious, that is going to feel like luxury putting it on, even just holding the palette, and you're going to really enjoy that and you love these shades, it is 100% worth it in my opinion. There is definitely a difference in quality when it comes to the mattes, and again when it comes to the shimmers, how easy they are to use, how they look on the lid, and how they blend and how they work together and how you can layer them and all of that stuff. But the whole thing is about luxury. If you find it hard to put a look together, if you want more mattes, if this is like so much money it hurts your eyes just to look at it, if you don't like glitters, etc, etc. If you're not impressed by packaging, if that means nothing to you, then it's absolutely not going to be worth the difference between a Pat McGrath and an Anastasia palette. You will love these, get loads of use out of them, use them every day of your life, not care that the packaging is lighter. And actually, before I saw this, I thought this packaging was, you know, amazing. I love it. I like the packaging. This is just like, it's been packaged personally for the Queen. That's the only way I can think of to put it. Now, I wanted to show you two of these shades swatched side by side to show you the difference between Anastasia shadows and Pat McGrath shadows. Now, I don't want anyone to think I'm bashing Anastasia shadows. They are one of my absolute favorite eyeshadow palettes. I have 3 of them. I'm going to be getting the Sultry palette to make it 4. I love them. There is nothing wrong with them, and I think they represent a very good quality for the price point. But I just want to show you that there is a difference between these and the Pat McGrath for the money. So I'm going to be using a fairly similar shade, and you can just see I'm just going to rub my finger on there. That's what it looks like on the finger. Now I'm going to use the closest shade that I have between these two palettes, which is this shade up here, which is probably a lighter rose gold. I'm going to rub my finger on there. Now, instantly, the first difference that I notice is on here. As you can see, it's all crumbly, which once you spread it on the lid isn't going to show, isn't going to be an issue. But on this finger, the Pat McGrath, you can see how much wetter, smoother, etc. it is. And that is going to give you a lot less fallout. This one is obviously, you can see it's going to have more kickback, more fallout, because it is that sort of looser consistency. Doesn't really bother me, but lots of people do not like the fact that the Anastasia shadows do have that kickback and fallout and things like that. So now I'm going to swatch these shadows one swipe for you. This finger is Pat McGrath and this finger is Anastasia, and I just want you to see the difference. So here they are, and you can see there that you've got all that sort of crumbliness from the Anastasia shadow, whereas the Pat McGrath is just wet, beaming, and it has a lot more reflection to it. Pigment wise, the Anastasia palette is absolutely killing it. There is no shame in Anastasia's pigment whatsoever. The difference really in the two brands is like the finish, the amount of sort of product that you need to use, how easy it is to, you know, use a small amount of the Pat McGrath and it go so far, whereas, you know, we know that with Anastasia shadows you can't sort of use a lot or you will just get loads of kickback. The Pat McGrath shadows just look incredibly shiny and glittery versus the Anastasia shadows, which look more of a shimmer as opposed to like a glitter. So, you know, it's personal preference, I guess. So that's the eyeshadow palette. Now, when it comes to the lipsticks, I find it a much easier answer. And I think the reason being that the price point is not as much of a huge leap from like a sort of average high-end price to Pat McGrath. It's pretty much the same. When you're trying to justify, you know, the price of the eyeshadow palette when it's, you know, 2.5 times the price of an Anastasia palette, it's a lot harder to think, can it really be worth 2.5 times an Anastasia palette, which we're already really loving. With the lipsticks, these are £31 or $38 and you get 4 grams. So in comparison, a Charlotte Tilbury lipstick is £24 for 3.5 grams. So it's a few pound less, but you get a little bit less. So I feel like her lipsticks are much more in line price-wise with a sort of average high-end brand. And therefore it's very easy to justify and tell you that I think these are 100% worth it. The packaging is gorgeous, it's sturdy, it's classy, it's expensive looking. The formula, today I am wearing Los Angeles, which is one of her limited edition shades. It's still available online though. And I also have one of her classic red shades. This is the shade Elson. So this is a Mattetrance, and the one I'm wearing today is a Luxetrance. So this is her more sort of luminous finish, and this is her matte finish. And when, I swear again, the second you put this on your lips, the second you swipe this, you will know where the price comes from. I used the lightest hand and a couple of swipes on there, and it is absolutely perfect, opaque, smooth, just, it's everything. The formula of these to me is totally unique. It's the best formula I've ever tried, both her Luxetrance and her Mattetrance formulas. The Mattetrance is the best matte lipstick I've ever used, the most comfortable, the easiest to put on and get a gorgeous, even, seamless coverage of the lips. This Luxetrance lipstick is my favorite lipstick of all time. The Los Angeles, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see, but it is so smooth. It makes your lips look so much smoother. It doesn't settle into any lines or exaggerate any lines on your lips. It's very long lasting. It's incredibly comfortable and hydrating on the lips. It is just the most glorious formula, and because the price point is fairly standard, it's very easy for me to say that I totally feel like these lipsticks are justified for the price. So there you have it. I hope you found this helpful and this has helped you decide whether this brand or these products are for you or not. I would always wait for the sale unless it's just easy for you to drop that amount of money on an eyeshadow palette. As I did, I thought about it for a long time. I considered which one I wanted, and then I waited for the sale and got 25% off, which made it, an easier decision for me. But as I said at the beginning, this is ultimately going to be a very personal decision. Like, my sister would drop down dead if I told her how much I paid for this eyeshadow palette, and she would never in her mind think that it was worth it, even if it put it on itself for you. Whereas I was desperate to get my hands on it, and I would have paid full price if the sale hadn't have happened. So it's just a total individual decision. It depends how much you love makeup. It depends how much you are desperate to try her brand, how much you're going to appreciate the packaging and the things that push the price up. So it's really down to you to decide. My personal feeling about it, having bought it and used it a lot and tried it all, is that there's lots of things that justify the price when you're comparing it to a lower priced eyeshadow palette, and there are lots of reasons why it's priced so high, and to me it's totally worth it. So as I said, I hope you found this helpful, and I would love to see you in a future video. So please consider subscribing before you go, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care for now. Bye 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 bye.